Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to our session, Changing Invisible Norms, the Key to Inclusive Water and Wash. On behalf of Water for Women, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, waterways and community. I pay respects to their elders and leaders, past, present and emerging, as well as to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today, including those of you attending the session. I also extend my respect to all Indigenous peoples from the many lands on which you are calling in from today. So I'm Joanna Mott, otherwise known as JOSE, Gender and Social Inclusion Advisor with the Australian Government's Water for Women Fund. And also please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. I'm also joined here by my colleague and co-facilitator, Melita Grant from the University of Technology Sydney's Institute for Sustainable Futures. Hi, Melita. And also joining us are our co-conveners, the Australian Government's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Plan International, SMV, WaterAid and IDE. So together we're delighted to be hosting this exciting session to explore the importance of surfacing invisible social norms which impact so significantly on our daily lives, in our organisations and in our programs. By identifying and tackling harmful or negative norms, we are in a better position to address inequalities at all levels and contribute to more inclusive water and wash systems, structures and services. So a couple of housekeeping matters. Firstly, to ensure greater accessibility to this session, we've enabled Zoom's live transcript closed caption functionality, so you can access this using the CC button in the menu tab. And questions are most welcome in the session, and we will do our best to respond to as many as we can, but we do ask that you write them in the Pathable chat, if possible, so that after the session, we're able to respond to any that we were not able to get to during the session. And in this way, all the questions are in one place. After a short introductory presentation by Sue Cavell and myself, this session includes a range of presentations from our partners on norms change and engagement with rights holder organisations, and will be followed by an opportunity for you all to engage with our panellists through an interactive Q&A session. But firstly, to open the session, I'm honoured to introduce Christine Clark, the Australian Ambassador for Women and Girls, who will give her opening remarks for the session. Thank you, Christine.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Christine Clark, Australia's Ambassador for Women and Girls. I begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people as the traditional custodians of the land on which I speak to you today. Dawara Nuna, Dawara Ngunnawal, Yangu Nalawiri, Duni Manyin, Ngunnawal Wari, Dawara Wari, Ningara, Dindi, Wongarali Jinyin. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I also extend my respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to speak with you all today. On behalf of Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, I'd like to welcome everybody to this important session at World Water Week, Changing Invisible Norms, the Key to Inclusive Water and Wash. Thanks to the Stockholm International Water Institute for delivering this year's hybrid event. Gender equality, disability and social inclusion are cornerstones of Australia's foreign policy, development assistance, humanitarian aid and partnerships. They are also woven into the fabric of our other major departmental strategies, including our Climate Change Action Strategy. We will never overcome the massive challenges we face in realising adequate and sustained access to water, sanitation and hygiene for all, as expressed in Sustainable Development Goal 6, unless we address intersecting gender and social inequalities and strengthen diversity in representation, voices and ideas. The Australian Government's Water for Women Fund and its implementing partners recognise the central role that gender and social norms, beliefs, attitudes, behaviours, laws and structures can play in reinforcing and tackling inequalities. By identifying discriminatory and harmful social norms, we can, collectively, take decisions and pursue actions to replace them, to create and reinforce norms based on respect for human rights for everyone, where there is equity and equality. This includes promoting equitable access to and use of water resources and wash services. However, shifting harmful social norms in ways that are meaningful, locally driven, safe and transformative takes time and resources. We need to invest in systems, processes, capacities, knowledge and structures that are purposeful, inclusive, evidence-based and grounded in human rights. In this session, you will hear about the different ways this is being done to powerful effect. This gold standard session will share innovative approaches from the Indo-Pacific region to change social norms that harm women and marginalised groups, including people with disabilities, sexual and gender minorities, and people living in poverty. During the session, you will hear from Water for Women, WaterAid, SNV Nepal, IDE Cambodia, Yayasan Plan International Indonesia, and the Institute for Sustainable Futures at the University of Technology, Sydney. We will also involve you in a panel discussion with representatives from the International Women's Development Agency, SNV Bhutan, and Plan International. We hope this will be an engaging session. I thank all of our presenters and panellists who are all Water for Women Fund partners for the energy, enthusiasm and time they have invested in preparing this session. Water for Women Fund partners show the power and impact that comes with bringing perspectives together: climate change, gender equality, disability and social inclusion, and WASH. Your work shows this is not about choices to do one thing or another. The communities where we partner are at the forefront of climate change. These communities have diverse leaders who work to see access to WASH as fundamental. I warmly encourage you all to participate in the discussion with the presenters and panellists and to keep inclusion front of mind in all other conversations during and following World Water Week. I now pass back to Joanna, your facilitator for the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Such a powerful message about how norms can either be reinforced or shifted for greater equality, and how communities are at the forefront of climate change, and therefore how inclusion needs to be at the forefront of our thinking and practice. So throughout this session, I invite you to reflect on the question, what will this session mean for you and your work? In our call to action at the end of the session, we'll invite you to share your ideas via Menti. That's something just to reflect on throughout the session. So let's begin by taking a look at why we think social norms change in the water and wash sectors is so important. Slide, yeah. Next slide, thanks. So gender equality, disability and social inclusion are central to the Water for Women Fund, because more equitable processes, systems and structures ensure better outcomes for all. Achieving the Sustainable Development Goals depends on this. And given the context of an increasingly fraught world beset by climate hazards, diversity in decision-making is key to a more resilient future. Next slide, please. We're increasing our understanding on the need to focus on underlying norms that drive our behaviours and practices in positive or negative ways. To change harmful norms, we need to surface them so that we can support the shift to more inclusive and equitable water and wash. Next slide. So what do we actually mean by social norms? We can understand them as the written, unwritten, and often invisible rules that people in a group conform to, largely because most other people in the group conform to them. Inherent in these rules are the dynamics of power and privilege, which adversely affect the voices and agency of the marginalised. Next slide. And here you can see some examples of underlying norms that link directly to harmful and inequitable WASH behaviours. If identified and challenged in contextually appropriate ways, water and WASH programs can make a significant contribution to deeper and lasting social change. Next slide. So to shift norms in ways that are safe and do no harm, seeking the voices of those with lived experience and who are poorly served by these underlying norms is critical to transformative change. Water for Women partners recognise the important role of rights holder organisations, such as women's organisations and organisations of people with disabilities, in driving this change, and have been actively seeking meaningful partnerships to support equality in WASH and beyond. Next slide. And this list shows the numerous partnership benefits to both WASH and rights holder organisations. To be truly transformative, partnerships need to support the agendas of both and recognise the benefits for both. Thank you, and now you'll hear from WASH consultant Sue Cavill, who will be talking to us about social norms change in a bit more detail. Over to you, Sue.
So much of the promising practice on social norms initiatives derives from programmes designed to tackle harmful practices such as female genital mutilation and cutting, child marriage, gender-based violence, or confining people with disabilities to the home. For these kinds of harmful behaviours, changing individual attitudes or opinions will not be sufficient. It requires broader attention to the social norms that hold these behaviours in place. Social norms are often reinforced by families and peers, schools, communities, and the media, but those in our closest social networks are often the ones that have the strongest influence on norms. So WASH actors can learn a lot from these broader multi-sectoral initiatives that target specific population groups and overcome the underlying causes of inequality and discrimination. And the tools and resources they've applied to norms change can help reduce tolerance within communities of exclusionary and harmful social norms relating to improved WASH practices, such as norms on the use of violence, men's participation in care activities, and general views about gender equality and disability. And the Water for Women Fund have recently produced a literature review on norms change within these multi-sectoral initiatives and developed guidance for WASH actors on how to apply social norms thinking to their programming. So WASH programmes have tended to leverage certain social and gender norms to contribute to improved WASH outcomes. And these might be norms that stereotype women in traditional roles as wives or mothers, or people with disabilities as always dependent on caregivers. This runs the risk of reinforcing restrictive roles and constraining the leadership and participation of women and people with disabilities, and reducing the opportunity for greater equality. That said, there are examples emerging in the WASH sector and within Water for Women projects of systematically embedding social and gender norms change in the design of WASH projects. There are examples of designing norms change activities to equip men with practical knowledge and alternatives to inequitable versions of masculinity, and activities that focus on shared decision-making around household budgeting and investment, and the equal division of caregiving and domestic roles within the household. And men's engagement can also play a significant role in shifting some of the taboos associated with menstruation and women's WASH leadership. So we know that addressing social norms will require a combination of scaling up, scaling out, and scaling deep. We know that social norms mean that a change in individual attitudes alone will not do the trick. People will not change their behaviour if they cannot be assured that many others are willing to change at the same time. And in the WASH sector, we have some experience already of scaling out by reaching more people with behaviour change, but we have less experience in scaling up social norms change through WASH systems. although there are some examples emerging of embedding new social norms in sector institutions, policy, planning, budgeting, regulation, and monitoring. So whilst this is a new area where more learning is required, we do know that embedding equality in WASH projects alone does not equal empowerment or transformative change. So we must scale deep to address the root causes that hold harmful practices in place and make people consider them normal. We need to address the norms that perpetuate inequality, stigma, and violence, and these operate at a deeper level and require attention to power, privilege, and resistance. This requires facilitating community-led processes, embedding do no harm, and attention to empowerment. So in collaboration with rights holder organisations, WASH actors can catalyse community-led action to end harmful practices and norms, socialise change that is already underway, and reinforce new social norms and WASH behaviours.
Thank you, Sue, for sharing the scaling up, out and deep framework, such an effective way to illustrate how water and WASH actors can embed social norms change approaches in their programming. Okay, now for the presentations. If you have any questions directly related to the presentations, please feel free to pop them in the Pathable chat, and some of the presenters who are here with us in this session will try to respond directly to them there. So in the first presentation, Changing Harmful Norms Together with Rights Holder Organisations in Indonesia, the Key to Inclusive WASH, Novika Noyadianti and Wahyu Triayudi from Yayasan Plan International in Indonesia and Melita will share some of the important learnings from their Water for Women research on CSO partnerships in Indonesia. Over to you, Novika.
Thank you for the opportunity to share WASH, gender and disability CSO partnership and collaboration in Indonesia. It will be presented by me, Novika Nurdianti, Plan Indonesia, Triwayudi from Plan International Australia, and Melita Grant from UTS ISF. WASH CSOs and right holder organization, in this case women organization and organization for people with disabilities, have been working together in Indonesia for mutual benefit and to shift harmful gender norms. And this session will be shared about benefits and challenges of this partnership and how Plan Indonesia has used research processes to inform policy and practice. How are partnership and changing harmful gender and disability norm related? There are 7 steps for process for supporting norm change, resourcing organizational backing and planning, understanding social norm, embedding social norms, do no harm, create a critical mass to support the new social norm and practices beyond the community. It means dissemination and promotion of new positive norm into broader society. And the step 6 is maintenance of the new positive norm. And the last one is monitoring of the norm. By resourcing RHOs, we are strengthening civil society working of norm change. And RHOs can help you to understand the harmful social norms relevant to the context and what some strategies are to address this. RHOs can help you to anticipate any unintended consequences and possible backlash to action. And RHOs are part of broader movement and can help to build critical mass as well as maintain the new positive norm. And the last one, RHOs can help to identify relevant and appropriate indicators to monitor over time and can help with data collection and analysis. To investigate this relationship, Plan and ISF UTS conducted research together to respond to 2 key questions. The first one is, what are the drivers, benefit, and challenge of engagement between WASH sector, CSO, and gender equality organization. And the second one is how can CSOs partner more effectively to maximize WASH gender equality and inclusion outcome. The research report includes 8 key recommendations for WASH and gender equality organization partnering and working with each other, and this recommendation can be read at the link. How Plan Indonesia has used the research. Plan Indonesia has been working in partnership with women organization and DPOs. And we co-create the joint project or initiative together from the start before signing MOU and implementing the project. And we discuss the value, rights, obligation of partnership of both parties before signing the MOU. And capacity building, to build capacity based on shared value and goal. And Plan Indonesia also provides specific staff to support DPO and women organization for intense support and communication. And we conduct financial management training and discuss the financial policies of the two organizations between Plan Indonesia and partner. And Plan Indonesia don't only collaborate with women organization and DPOs to reach group of women with disabilities, but Plan Indonesia also conducting specific monitoring through GWMT or gender in WASH monitoring tool and inclusive monitoring to reach a diverse group. Terima kasih. Thank you.
Thanks, Navika. It's so great to see how Plan has used the research findings to inform their own work practice with their RHO partners. And now to the next presentation, addressing gender-based violence through rural WASH systems, partnering with local rights groups in Papua New Guinea, where we hear from Sophie Mangay of the East Sepik Council of Women, WaterAid's partner for supporting women's rights and interest in its Water for Women WASH program. Thanks also to Enid Coupe, Glenda Yukana and Chelsea Huggett from WaterAid for their contributions to this important presentation in surfacing the invisibility of gendered norms related to violence in the home and community. Thanks, Sophie.
Good afternoon all. Sophie Manga is my name. I am the president for East Sepik Council of Women. I'd like to present to you the WASH program in PNG. As partner to WaterAid, we've been working with women in gender program. Okay, the first thing I'd like to present to you is changing invisible norms, the key to inclusive water and WASH. Addressing gender-based violence through rural WASH system strengthening Papua New Guinea. Partnering with local gender organization East Sepik Council of Women. Soap making as an economic empowerment initiative to support women's economic livelihood. Inclusive WASH for WeWork project background. Inclusive WASH for WeWork aims to benefit an estimate 42,400 people in WeWork. More inclusive, equitable, and sustainable access to water. Sanitation and hygiene promotion WASH services, the empowerment of women and people with disabilities through the creation of an effective participation in decision-making forums associated with WASH service delivery. Soap making was added as a complementary intervention package to inclusive WASH, which particularly aimed at improving the health and hygiene practices. It is also an avenue to address GBV gender inequality. Objectives of the soap making. ESCA's objectives in establishing women's enterprise for soap making are to provide income generating activity for women and families in the community, have easy access to soap and to improve health and hygiene for everyone in the community, improve and strengthen the ESCA network to raise awareness about GBV, increase capacity and status of women. GBV awareness raised through soap making program. LLG strand 60, 6 TOT training of trainers 40. Community members trained on soap making in this reporting period 31. ESCA led the soap making workshop in WARM, co-facilitated by Appropriate Technology Community Development Institute. While originally was designed to be a women-only livelihood, ESCA, in pursuit to encourage do not harm approach, invited and encouraged men and partners participation in the activity. Throughout the workshop, ESCA facilitated gender awareness raising sessions with men and women, incorporating gender-based violence messaging and women's empowerment. Men understood GBV issues and have revealed their own experience and strongly advocate prevention message among themselves during soap making workshop. Quote from a ward member, Thomas Tallis: "I will not deny the fact that all the gender-based violence and abuse cases that we have discussed in common in the community. I want to thank you, WaterAid, for this awareness. You have set a new pathway in GBV for us to take and try and prevent and address these issues in the community." Outcomes. Social norm addressed included male control, especially with decision over finances and family. Soap sales has addressed extra income generating for the families to meet their daily needs. Women felt empowered with the extra cash to support their husband now than compared to before. Other women also shared same sentiments, which that has led to a reduction in family violence over short of money to support family needs and expenses. Men now respect women to make decisions over use of money through gender awareness on the rights of women as equal. Lesson plan. Do no harm gender roles awareness helps shape men's behavior to support their women. In Boykin, Joycelyn's husband rose above all odds to support his wife in soap making to extend where they are in the process to formally register their small SME association that will enable them to achieve their business plan. Men have the fair understanding on different abuse cases, which reflected in the matching exercises where they correctly linked scenarios to different abuses, also advocated on prevention messages. Conclusion. Gender norms are very hard to change because these are behavioral practices that are learned and practiced and have been rooted in families and societies over time. Thus, it takes time to break them through and break them down for the better. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Sophie. Amazing to see what can be achieved through one really intentional initiative. Better hygiene, including menstrual health, livelihoods, women's empowerment and awareness of gender-based violence, all through a strong do no harm lens that by actively involving men in appropriate ways. Okay, the next presentation that we have is called Utilising the Shock of COVID-19 to disrupt gender norms in wash-related care and domestic work in Nepal. Vandana Sinya and Sabitra Dakal from SMV Nepal, along with Claire Rowland, share their research findings. Again, another great example of surfacing the invisibility of gendered norms, but this time in relation to care and domestic work. Over to you, Vandana and Claire.
Thank you for having us here today. When COVID-19 became a global pandemic, many of us asked ourselves how government responses to COVID could change life as we know it. Many studies and news items that followed showed how deeply entrenched gender-based inequalities at home and at work were. Many of us grappled with the question of how and in what form will a COVID-19 recovery scenario look like. As part of its ongoing work in water and sanitation, SNB in Nepal, supported by the Australian government's Water for Women's Innovation and Impact Grant, used participatory methods to explore the shock of COVID-19 on gender norms and to seek opportunities on how we can recover better and more inclusively. Initial research findings provide us with a basis to argue that the equitable distribution of both paid and unpaid work opportunities and responsibilities is critical in achieving an inclusive economic recovery from COVID-19.
SNV in Nepal conducted its research in two very distinct terrains: mountainous dialect, where communities are more dispersed, and in mostly flat, densely populated Salahi with Madhesi communities. The shocks of COVID-19 on households in both locations were mostly similar. Of those shocks shared, the most important to note is that household sizes increased significantly, and most people within households were unable to work in paid activities during lockdown periods. New roles in the household arising from COVID-19 were distributed along existing gender lines. Men did roles considered to be supervisory and decision-making, whereas women continued their care role. We did, however, see a totally different situation arise in each district during lockdown when it came to the division of existing unpaid care work. In Dailek, where police enforced isolation periods for men and not women, research participants described men and women in many families as trading places, women doing work like farming, ploughing, digging for wages, selling vegetables and goats, buying goods from the market, and men doing household care and domestic work. In Salahi, by contrast, men were described as sitting around, playing games, making TikTok videos, and occasionally doing care and domestic work when life got too boring.
Based on our research, several beliefs and norms continue to surround the gender division of labor in care and domestic work. In many families, the daughter-in-law has been brought in to do care and domestic work for the household. Fear, loss of respect, or social connections was a clear theme preventing men from doing care work. If men undertook care work, they risked being mocked, attacked, or harassed by their own family, friends, or neighborhoods for either becoming a woman, a transgender person, or having had fallen under a woman's control. In Dailek, women expressed concern over losing their influence and what little power they possessed at home through their care and domestic labor. In Sarlahi, care and domestic work was described as beneath men. Mother-in-laws can play a policing role over women's care and domestic work. If a woman asks for help, she could be perceived as lazy, trying to enslave her husband, or undermine his parents. Women in Sarlahi as mothers, wives, and mothers-in-law were described as reinforcing these patriarchal norms, actively preventing men and boys from assisting women in the house.
Here we present the differences between two research sites in terms of attitudes and behaviours. Young men in Dailek were less concerned with public opinion and more interested in change. This was the opposite for Salahi. Men and young men in Dailek were more likely to take on tasks that would make significant difference in the life of women and young women. Whereas in Salahi, water collection was considered by men and young men as one of the most acceptable tasks for them, a task that women considered easy and quick as household hand pumps were readily available. And we only see sustained care and domestic work sharing post-lockdown by men in Dailek.
We have drawn the following key lessons from this research. Gender norms can be same but different across a country. New COVID-19 related roles were divided along traditional gender norms. Gender norms were disrupted by COVID-19, but not in all locations. Increased family harmony does not equate to a life free from violence for women. We need to engage men as well as women and community leaders to change gender norms. Changing norms is critical to equitable and inclusive recovery. It can also result in better health and worse outcomes for the whole family.
Thank you, Bandana and Claire. A powerful example of why context matters and the importance of water and wash actors taking gender norms at the household level into account in their programming. That's great. Thank you. Now to the last presentation, last but not least, normalising pro-poor markets for wash. We're going to hear from Tyler Kazol from Water for Women partner IDE Cambodia on how their project is working on addressing norms and stigma relating to people living in poverty. Over to you, Tyler.
Hello, my name is Tyler Kazol, and I'm the WASH Program Manager at IDE Cambodia. In this presentation, we'll take a bit of a reflexive perspective on norms. We're going to be talking about normalizing pro-poor markets for WASH, for implementers. So specifically, we'll be talking about how reframing low-income households as being recipients of charity to being legitimate market participants can help us mitigate some of the biggest risks that we face as implementers. Some of the biggest challenges and fears we face as a sector are often that our solutions don't fit needs or that they might not last. So this first risk, that our solutions don't fit needs, especially for the most vulnerable. Well, if we frame the people we work with as clients, low-income households as clients, we're forced to focus on designing and promoting aspirational but low-cost products and services. As clients, households retain the power to choose what's valuable for themselves. And in this way, as service providers, we can check our assumptions and we can resist prescribing solutions that aren't appropriate. Put simply, we know we're addressing customers' perceptions of their real needs, including affordability, if people are paying for that product or service. This can give implementers a quick and clear metric for understanding if our approaches are valuable, and thus we can learn more about the people we're working to serve. Now, with financing and other affordability increasing mechanisms like targeted subsidies, market-based programs can be even more inclusive of a wider, even lower income client base. IDE's experience offering targeted sanitation subsidies for low-income households illustrates one way that you can push a market-based WASH project to be even more pro-poor. So in 2018, before IDE was offering targeted sanitation subsidies, about 20% of our latrine customers were low income, or ID poor, which is the government's national poverty registration system. After scaling up targeted subsidies for discounted latrines in our operating area, eventually the program is selling more toilets to ID poor households than non-poor households. As you can see, in 2020, about 54% of all latrine purchases were made by ID poor households. In total, IDE facilitated about 38,000 partially subsidized latrine purchases to ID poor households in that time. So as you can see, since we've scaled down subsidies, as we prepare to scale down the project, the proportion of low-income households we're reaching has dropped considerably. This segment of the population essentially comprises the lowest income households who will likely need additional support, potentially even full subsidies to acquire latrines in the near future. So while this illustrates some of the limits of market-based approaches, we also believe that our experience is proof of their inclusive potential. So this next risk, that our solutions might not last. Research that IDE's conducted in Cambodia indicates that if customers value and dedicate investment to a durable toilet, they're more likely to use, maintain, and upgrade it. So ensuring low-income households have access to aspirational sanitation products is key for long-lasting impact. Also, local retailers are the outlets most likely to serve households, including the lowest income, with products and services long after implementers are gone. Therefore, if an implementer is thinking about clients and treating all of the people in the area as potential clients, they'll ensure that they're not disrupting supply chains and local businesses. Offering indiscriminate or poorly targeted full sanitation subsidies is one surefire way to do this. It's one surefire way to undercut local businesses, alter customer perceptions and expectations, and ultimately disrupt the sustainability of service provision in that area. In short, as development implementers, if we perceive all households as clients, but not exclusively and inevitably our clients, we can be sensitive of market dynamics. We can prevent doing harm to the areas where we work. In this way, we can promote real sustainable change. As the development sector wrestles with its legacy of colonialism, the client lens can be a useful tool. By recognizing low-income households as legitimate market participants, we can ensure that they retain agency and that they choose the wash products and services they value most. We believe that normalizing the notion of a pro-poor wash market is imperative to ensuring right fit, sustainable solutions for the people and communities we work to serve. Thank you very much. Hope you all have a very nice World Water Week.
Thank you very much, Tyler. And also thank you so much to Jose, who's led us through this webinar to this point. And you'll be hearing from Jose again a little bit later on. I'd just like to thank all of our presenters for their rich and innovative presentations and for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. I'm sure you'll all have ideas about what really resonated for you, what are key points that connect to your work and your interests. And I encourage you to feel free to add to the chat, the Pathable chat we ask you to add to, which is the one on the SIWI World Water Week website. And feel free to ask any of our presenters questions. Those presenters that are here on the webinar today will be able to answer directly. And any others that aren't here, we can take those questions away and respond at a later time. So from those presentations, there's quite a diverse array of approaches to tackling harmful social norms, as you saw, but all clearly related and connected to the WASH sector. And some of the key takeaways I took away were that engagement with rights holder organisations need to be purposeful and committed and supportive in order to achieve those full benefits. So not tokenistic and not transactional. And tackling norms related to gender-based violence is, of course, important to WASH-related work, but it really needs to be underpinned by a strong do-no-harm approach. And understanding the dynamics at a household level in relation to care and domestic work is still critical. It is still an essential issue and a potentially harmful gender norm to tackle by WASH programs and broader GEDC work. And finally, Tyler talked to us about treating poor households as decision makers, householders as decision makers in their own right and customers in their own right, and the potential to shift norms from a charity mode more towards people's preferences and agency. So they were just some of the key takeaways that I had from those presentations. And as I said, feel free to add to the chat, the Pathable chat. And we're also asking if you can keep in mind the question, what's something that you'll take away from today, from the sessions and from the examples given? And what does it mean for you and your work? So just keep that question in mind. We'll ask you again in a little while to respond to that. So now we're very fortunate to be joined by colleagues from WASH organisations and rights holder organisations for our Q&A panel session. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Ugyen Wangchuk, and he works for SMV Bhutan as the Gender Equality, Disability and Social Inclusion Advisor. And Ugyen has a background in education and specialises in disability issues. Welcome, Ugyen.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. And I'd also like to welcome Novika Nordianti, who is the Water for Women Project Manager at Plan Indonesia, International Indonesia, and she has more than 15 years experience working in public health issues, including in gender equality, disability inclusion, WASH in schools and adolescent and reproductive health. So you've already met Novika, and welcome back, Novika. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita.
Great to see you. And also, please welcome Joanne Crawford, who works as a strategic advisor for the Equality Insights team at the International Women's Development Agency. And Jo has a background in gender, public policy, international relations and development with a focus on gender-sensitive poverty measurement. Welcome, Jo. Thank you for joining us. So the first question I have is for Navika. And in your presentation, you identified some ways that Plan has used the research that we conducted together to inform your policy and practice. And I'm just wondering if you could talk through in a little bit more detail around some of those key takeaways that you would recommend to other organizations looking to partner with rights holder organizations. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Melita. Lesson learned from Plan Indonesia partnership with right holder organization are the first one is co-design the project together from the start and discuss the value, rights, and obligation of partnership is important to feel more confident to be involved in the project. And the second one, organizational skills are developed through partnership. Improve organizational skill in both WASH issues and project management, capacity building, regular communication, and coordination, as well as assistance are important things to do. And the last one is flexibility in funding from donor is important. The flexibility provided by the donor and internal Plan Indonesia makes it possible for the project strategy to change. So this partnership can happen in the middle of the project. Thank you, Melita.
Thank you, Navika. Very interesting to hear you talk about flexibility, because I do recall that coming through in the research very strongly, and just really underpins a lot of those partnerships that are based on trust when you have that level of flexibility. So that was a really interesting point you made there. And I'll now ask you, Ugiana, a question about, if we take the position that pockets of resistance and backlash are inevitable as a result of norms change work, we know that it's important to preempt and address these sorts of challenges as part of doing a no harm approach. From the work that you do at SNV and the work that you've done in this respect, in terms of managing that sort of backlash and resistance, what do you think are some of the most successful strategies that you've employed to reduce that harm to marginalised people that you work with?
Yep. Thank you, and I'm overwhelmed. So please accept warm greetings from remote Bhutan. See, SNB's approach in terms of do no harm, in line with the National Policy for Persons with Disabilities in Bhutan 2019, SNB in Bhutan's approach to do no harm is by considering the needs, the challenges, issues, and opportunities of marginalized groups, including women and people with disabilities, that we felt is paramount. And to this end, SNB in Bhutan has adopted the following strategies to prevent and mitigate the backlash towards women and marginalized groups of people with disabilities in particular. So the first one, SNB's approach was the formation of a disability composed of women with disabilities, and the role is to advise the SNB. The secondly is a serious engagement and participatory and consultative approach with people with disabilities themselves. And of course, the next is the close collaboration and coordination with RHOs and GPOs, and seeking guidance and from partners, our institutions like ISF UTS and CBM Australia. And the next one is the providing the platform for women and marginalized groups. And of course, we also got into supporting their parents and caregivers as well during the workshops and seminars. And then the third one is environment. So just to set an example, During the recent transformative leadership for women with disabilities, we have adopted the teaching learning materials, adapted, the modified, and of course substituted as well. So in this respect, the SNB was sensitive enough, careful enough to listen and to consider all the necessary challenges, issues, their needs, and then the arrangements were adopted accordingly. So though the passion like never before, it is the additional time and resources engaged there. However, SNB in Bhutan feels that spending on women and marginalized groups, especially people with disabilities, is not an expenditure. So we have discovered, SNB in Bhutan has discovered that it is an investment. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Wow, again, that's such a rich list of very, very careful and well thought through strategies that you have just presented to us. And like you said, everything from considering people's families and carers and people who are carers and those partnerships that Novika has talked about. But it is really clear from you outlining all of those strategies how many angles you have taken to support people and to reduce that backlash and to avoid doing harm. Thank you for that. I think what we need to do is write those pointers up and pop them on this page, because that's a fantastic guideline for us all. Thank you so much for that. And I now have a question which is related in terms of giving advice to the sector. And Jo, from your very rich experience from a women's rights organisation perspective, what advice would you give to a WASH project to help shift those harmful gender norms and to advance gender equality?
Thanks very much, Lolita. There's been an extraordinary richness of research throughout this collaboration, and some of that you've already seen in the presentations tonight. So what I want to do is make 5 main points that really sort of underline some of the considerations that are already have been presented tonight. Firstly, establish an ongoing relationship with women's rights organisations in the project context. I think women's rights organisations are really essential partners in realising the full value and potential of WASH investments. They hold important knowledge and experience that really complements and extends WASH expertise. For example, about how to navigate and work effectively in a particular context, so it can work around or through barriers. Often they've been seen before. Women's rights organisations have an ongoing focus on gender equality, and that can help you achieve more faster. Sometimes norms really lag reality, and women's rights organisations are more likely to be in touch with changes in roles and contributions as they're happening. They understand that making those kinds of changes visible can help other people imagine different options and opportunities. And they also see what's not changing. For example, things like the care and domestic load, and can draw attention to the challenges and limitations that brings. Secondly, I think work at multiple levels. Gender norms are really rooted deep in how we think about ourselves, our relationships, our communities, and they're supported by economic and social rules. Some of these are visible, others are unspoken expectations of how things should work. And these rules exist at many levels, in our own minds, in the expectations of families and communities, in laws, in how our economies and societies are organised. These rules and expectations, if they were set many years ago, may not reflect how things work today or how individuals, families and communities want or need to organise their lives. And they limit opportunities and options for women and men. But gender inequality confirms that women and sexual minorities bear the greatest personal cost. As long as we see that inequality, that's telling us that the world isn't working equally for everyone. Changing this requires engaging at all levels where such norms operate. Thirdly, I think making visible the implications of harmful gender norms is really important. It can support conversations about who does what in families, communities, economies and societies, and whether different arrangements are possible and the benefits that could bring. So in contexts where women and men do different kinds of work, they may not fully know what the other does, what that work involves, its implications for individuals, the family, the community. This can hide the importance of particular roles and overall workloads across different kinds of work, unpaid, paid work, and make it more difficult for families and communities to organise a fair sharing of paid and unpaid work that meets different needs and priorities. In the resources for this session that have been uploaded, there's something called the floating coconut tool. And we saw earlier in one of the presentations that image of an iceberg. In tropical climates, we don't see icebergs, we see coconuts. But the idea is the same. There are things that you can see above the waterline, and below the waterline is a wide range of activities that help create economic and social value in communities. This tool was developed to explore who does what kinds of work and whether it has to be this way, whether there are possibilities to organise work in communities differently. And it can help to identify changes that would bring mutual opportunities and benefits. Fourthly, I think prioritise changes that benefit both women and men. This can build understanding about the benefits that flow from greater gender equality and build support for change. Finally, I think collecting data to inform your work and then demonstrate the difference that change can bring. Collecting data from individuals about WASH and other aspects of life can help you to reveal the kinds of implications of gendered unequal norms about who does what work and who makes what kinds of decisions, and also demonstrate the kinds of benefits that come from improving WASH access and tackling gender inequalities in and through WASH. The program that I work on, Equality Insights, is a gender data tool that collects information about 15 key dimensions of life plus assets from individuals to understand their circumstances and the practical barriers they experience and how those kinds of barriers vary by factors such as gender, age, disability and geography. There are links to a high-level overview and a short introductory video in the session resources. That's all from me. Back to you, Melita.
That's fantastic, Jo. And I hope that everyone jumps into those resources and has a look at those tools you've talked about. The floating coconut in particular sounds really interesting and relevant. And the importance of data you've just talked about there. But how beautifully you've linked the theme of this whole webinar about revealing the invisible, about transferring things that are unseen and not spoken about and might be taboo and might be assumed, and bringing that into the open, shining a light on it. And who's best to do that? Well, organizations that represent those issues and that have tracked these issues over time. Very, very salient messages there. And I encourage people to really look at those resources. I know that other organizations have similar tools, like people will know about the 24-hour clock, and communities talking about, well, men's groups and women's groups, for instance, talking about what work they do and then showing each other and being surprised. Oh, that's what you do all day. And that in our work, in our research evaluation in Timor-Leste, was found to be one of the most powerful paradigm shifting exercises that communities did with each other around that revealing, that shining a light and making the invisible visible. So thank you, Jo. Those are another very succinct, clear, practical points that we will post in this session. And also, as Jo said, the resources are connected to the folder for this session. So we have a little bit more time to ask a few extra questions. Now, I'm going to ask you again, and of course, if people have questions that they'd like to ask the panelists now, just pop it in that Pathable chat and we can ask them. But again, you are an expert in working in the disability sector, and it's going to be very interesting for us, I think, as a group to hear from you about what particular social norms do you work on, or what key ones do you think are really important to tackle and to strengthen disability inclusive WASH and really bring about those positive outcomes? And I'm just wondering if you could, just elaborate a little bit more on some of those particular norms that you've worked on in the disability sector. Thank you. sorry, again, to stop you, I'd just ask you to unmute again. We've been very good turning our microphones off and on. And if you don't mind, just unmute. Perfect.
Yeah,
thank you.
Extremely sorry. Yeah, extremely sorry. My apologies.
All good, all good.
Yeah. So particularly like to mention a few norms as per the CAP study carried out by the Royal Government of Bhutan in collaboration with UNICEF in 2016. So particularly pertaining to disability, Bhutanese, are very much, they do have limited knowledge regarding the disability. And they have reflected that given the no experience of having no children or maybe people with disabilities within their families, only very few institutions working for disability. So when people have not seen, these are few norms. So as per the study, they have found out like the lack of awareness among the general public, then it's followed by the neglect, and then in order to like boost, these are few like the people with disabilities, they hardly attended meetings, discussions were never tabled out in any of the forums. So in a way, like they were excluded and not actually mainstreamed into the, mainstream forums. So a few experiences and strategies that we can adopt could be like raising serious awareness about disability, firstly to people with disabilities themselves to accept. And the second thing would be sensitize the general public and population, and then to make the conscious effort to engage them through various means like having or maybe adopting a multi-pronged approach, then shift into the targeted strategies and intervention developed with RHOs and using the do no harm approach, of course, and the confidence building and providing the opportunity and enabling environment for the marginalized groups and especially people with disabilities. So aiming from the law, the policy framework, the physical environment, including the WASH infrastructures. So there needs a very serious awareness raising among the leaders, starting from local government to the highest decision-making bodies. So that is it. Back to you, Melita. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, we like to talk about the WASH system, and you've just identified so many elements of the WASH system that need to be approached and addressed to challenge that social norm of people not being seen as important to bring into the conversation. The norm of, well, they are this or that or the other, so we don't need to try. So you've really challenged and tackled that norm. So thank you for that example. And Novika, do you have any other examples or points you'd like to add to that? Because I know that you work a lot in this space as well.
Yeah, Plan Indonesia has conducted several partnerships with DPOs, including participatory action research and integrated water management. And all of this partnership, DPOs involved from the start and contributing to the proposed program. And the impact of the partnership is increased recognition for DPOs. DPO began to be involved in several government activities such as budget planning meeting, acceptance of budget proposal approval, for example, for accessible toilet, and conducting MOUs with the government. In one of plan area, they have MOUs with government for waste management. And now the government is starting to adopt Plan Indonesia's good practice by actively involving DPOs.
Fantastic outcome from your advocacy and your engagement support. So that is a brilliant story of impact, isn't it? Thank you, Novika. Now we do have time for just one more question, and I'm happy to ask Jo Crawford this question because it stems from a piece of work that I've found very, very powerful, influential, and I really recommend everybody download this resource. So yes, IWDA has recently commissioned some really important research on women's rights actors from the Pacific and asked them about their experience engaging with global North organisations over the last 30 years. And the research identified principles for equitable and empowered South-North partnerships and really took a clear lens around power dynamics. And it's got some fantastic principles and recommendations. So I'm just wondering, Jo, if you don't mind, I know it's a very big piece of work, but if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little sense of what some of the key messages were that came from that research and where people can find it and access that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Melita. Look, briefly, just for context, I just want to locate the research in IWDA's broader approach. So partnership and collaboration and respect for multiple kinds of knowledge have really been at the heart of how IWDA approaches its work since the organisation was founded 37 years ago. Our current strategic plan really elevates our organisational commitment to adopting a decolonial approach to feminism and development. And at a strategic level, this is captured in what we call our 3 S's framework, which helps us determine when we should step up, when we should stand with, or when we should step back. So really trying to be cognizant of our power and where we're best placed and where others are best placed. So stepping up involves using our power as an organisation to leverage resources or make our own contribution to feminist movements. Standing with involves working in solidarity, amplifying the work of actors from the majority world or global south, and stepping back when others are just better placed to take the lead. And so as we were thinking about this and trying to really learn more from the organisations and the individuals we work with, we're really trying to bring that into how we do our research and how we learn. So our approach to decolonising IWDA's feminism and practice is really drawing on recent research we commissioned to hear directly from 35 women's rights actors from the Pacific about their experience in engaging with global North organisations over the last 30 years. So trying to get a bit of a sense of how this has varied over time. The research was led by oceanic feminist researcher and storyteller, and used Pacific storytelling or Talanoa as its methodology. While it focused on the Pacific, I think the model that Alpha proposed and the many findings have really much broader relevance. And the sort of 4 main features or aspects of equitable and empowered partnerships that were identified across these conversations. The first is nurturing the space in between, or what Alpha called the VAR. So relationships matter. It's that relationship connection that's really critical. Decolonised development practice and shared power were another feature. Enabling global South power, agency and autonomy. So really trying to use the collaboration to enable power and agency, and contextual sensitivity. So we've heard really a lot about the importance of that tonight. We're integrating these principles across our approach and practice, and just to give you a sense of what that means in practice. So we're more regularly using participatory budgeting practices with partners, which means much more transparency, including about our own overhead fees, and in multi-partner coalitions, often having the funding and the share of that and the budget allocation to IWDA being determined by all partners, reducing the burden of reporting on partners, so providing oral reports, encouraging partners to report in their language of choice, encouraging partners to draw on their own organisational level MEL frameworks and templates, and doing some more intentional work on co-creating partnership principles, investing in external partnership broker to try and shift power dynamics, separating out partnership principles and funding orders or contracts, so we're dealing with them in different spaces. And so we have drafted a decolonial framework that went out to people who specialised in that to give us feedback. We'll be finalising that later this year. And I think in the resources uploaded to the session site, you'll find the research on creating equitable South-North partnerships. If not, you can definitely find it on IWDA's website. And for organisations that don't yet feel they can use the language of decolonising, I would really urge creating space and finding ways to enable and advance conversations about the agenda in your context and in language that works for you. I think it's really central to realising rights and to organisational effectiveness, and it'll transform what you do and how you do your work in ways that'll just increase everyone's impact overall. Thanks, Melita.
Wow, Jo, very powerful call to action there, and wonderful resources to support people to do exactly that, to start to have that conversation internally. And again, yes, very sorry that you're sweltering in 39-degree heat there. You're doing so well, and I'm so glad that the internet is still on. Yeah, how are you going?
Yeah, like today, especially, there's a soaring heat, I don't know. Then I had to run to the place where I have an excellent internet connection. Although there was some hiccup at the initial stage. Anyway, I got back.
Oh, you've done
thank you, everybody.
well. You've done so well. Thank you very much. And Jo, yeah, thank you for that call to action. We will definitely have those resources available. And just to quickly wrap up, there's been so many points raised by this wonderful panel, but some of the, I guess, key themes around that uncovering the invisible norms we talked about, shining the light, also integrating norms change into our wash and water work, and making that business as usual. At the moment, it's kind of cutting edge, so it's not going to take too much time for us to really to centralize those approaches and just make them really normal ways to go about our wash and water work. So congratulations for people on this panel and in this entire session for being those trailblazers, for leading the way. And also, we've heard many times about the different types of partnerships with rights holder organisations and the critical role they play. So organisations for people with disabilities, women's organisations, feminist organisations, sexual gender minority organisations, ethnic minority organisations. These are all rights holder organisations, and the WASH sector is more and more looking for genuine, inclusive, deep, long-term partnerships with such organisations. So now I'm very happy to thank the panel, big round of applause, and then hand the microphone back to Jose, who is now going to take us through an exciting new launch of some knowledge products. So thank you, panel.
Wow, that was amazing. Really, yes, so many interesting and powerful perspectives and experiences there. So a big thank you to the panelists and to Melita. As a moderator, it was really fascinating discussion to follow. Thank you. So now we do come, as Melita says, to the official launch of our new Water for Women transformative trio resources in terms of transforming norms and partnerships. And these are the 3 products you can see in front. They've just been published. So these resources can support water and wash actors in transforming norms and partnerships for better outcomes in water and wash, and in achieving gender and social equality. So the first one on the left is the Partnerships for Transformation guidance, which offers insights into effective partnerships between water, wash and rights holder organisations. And it also provides practical recommendations and checklists for effective collaboration in all types of partnerships. And the second one, the one in the middle, the Shifting Social Norms for Transformative Wash guidance, is designed to support water and wash actors to implement approaches to shift harmful and exclusionary social norms that underpin wash behaviours for marginalised groups. And the third, on the right, is the accompanying review of concepts, literature and practice resource, which is intended for those who would like to take a deeper dive into understanding norms. So it's useful for program planners, and management staff, technical advisors, and monitoring, evaluation and learning staff, many of whom would have already been integrating gender equality, disability and social inclusion in their programming, and so are looking for effective approaches to achieve and sustain long-term change. So you'll be able to find all these 3 resources in the Pathable file, along with all the others that have been mentioned during the session. So many great resources, which is fantastic. And so now we'll go to the Menti. It's now your turn to reflect and act. So I invite you all to go to the Menti link at the top of your screen and in the chat and answer the following question. What is something you'll take away from this session, and what does this mean for you and your work? So we'll just give you a couple of minutes just to collect your thoughts around that. So you would have been thinking about it throughout the session. And just feel free to add in when you're ready. Oh, that's great, isn't it, Joe? Using the IWDA decolonising guidance to start the conversation. Great news. Any others out there? Might be taking a while to come through. The 3S framework. Yeah. Stand up and, sorry, step up, stand with, and step back. Decolonising all project activities since the very beginning, i.e. the design phase, is really important to set a foundation for transferring power to local RHOs. Yeah, really great point. And just some of those practical ways of doing it, which Joe outlined. Yeah. So the idea of shifting norms is a good step towards transformation. That deep work. It's really important, as you've heard from all the examples today. So maybe while you're continuing, I might just say a few words. So just, yeah, we really encourage you, if you're looking to strengthen social norms change efforts within your own programming and organisations, to take a look at the resources in the sessions files on Pathable after the session. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to contact us through the Water for Women email address, which I think Em will be popping in the chat. And you can also find out more about Water for Women and the great work our partners are doing on our website. So please feel free to look there. So yeah, so there's some great examples. A big thank you to all our presenters and panelists for what you've shared with us today, and also to all of you for making the time to be part of this session and sharing your insights and experience. We hope you've enjoyed the session, and it's given you good food for thought. Judging by some of those takeaways, I think it has. In closing, I'd like to wish you all the very best in taking these actions forward to make norms visible, address the harmful ones and strengthen the positive ones, so that social inequalities can be reduced and more equitable, inclusive, resilient and sustainable behaviours and practices can really become the new norm. So thank you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of World Water Week.